Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
This is the Puma Future Ultimate, and if you're after something with a knitted or textile-based upper, it is arguably one of the top 5 currently on the market, and at $220 full retail, it's less expensive than all of its competition. However, you shouldn't waste your money on them. Send them down. And that's because of these boots right here. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the brand new Puma Future Pro, the first takedown model in the new Future lineup with a retail price of $140, which is by no means inexpensive, but it's $80 less than the top end model. And while there are some subtle physical differences and some minor differences as far as visuals go, what's crazy about this takedown model compared to just about any other one is that they feel exactly the same as the $220 version. And that's not a joke. If you have the Pro on one foot and the Ultimate on the other, you cannot tell a difference between them. Or at least any differences that you do notice, in my opinion, don't justify the extra $80 for the Ultimate. So with that in mind, we're gonna break down everything there is to know about the Puma Future Pro, compare them to the more expensive Ultimate model to distinguish what the differences actually are, take a look at how they fit and feel on feet, and ultimately rank them amongst other first-tier takedown models. Is this the best value for money football boot out there right now? It just might be. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around. And if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below. And as always, guys, if you enjoy these brutally honest reviews, don't forget to drop a like on the video and make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2023. Now, if you've had any interest in the new Future Ultimate, you've probably already seen my review of the latest top-end model. So I'm going to skip over many of the details because honestly, I think a lot of the technology that's been presented with this football boot is gimmicky to say the least. If you really believe that power tape is providing any meaningful structure on these, then I guess you can believe the same thing for the takedown model because it too features power tape. But what I want to focus on is realistically the 5 main noticeable or somewhat noticeable differences between these two football boots. With by far the biggest difference between these two being the weight. Both in the same size 9.5 US. We'll start off with the top end $220 Ultra Ultimate. They weigh in at 8.1 ounces, the equivalent of 230 grams. Change the scale back to ounces and we'll throw on the Future Pro. And you can see that they weigh in at 9.2 ounces, the equivalent of 260 grams. So that is a full ounce weight difference, or 30 grams to be exact, which is a noticeable amount of weight, but given the fact that the Ultra Ultimate isn't particularly light as it is, I personally don't feel that the extra 30 grams is that noticeable when again, you have one on each foot, but that's again a personal preference and something for you to decide for yourself. However, that is, like I said, the biggest difference between these two. With difference number 2 being the upper, which I would argue is almost a meaningless difference, if not actually in favor of the Takedown Pro model, in that you actually get more grip on the ball. It's still a textile-based synthetic material, and you're gonna find basically what feels like the same Evo knit across the top of the foot as well as around the ankle. Definitely some of the more premium stretchy knit material you're gonna find on any takedown model, period. It's thin, it's got a very light amount of padding, making for what I would argue is more along the lines of a barefoot feel, but just with that little bit of padding to take the edge off. The power tape, like I mentioned, doing absolutely nothing other than just having a visible zigzag on the surface of the upper, and you're also going to find some micro texturing scattered across the foot. If you compare it to the more expensive Ultimate model, there's an argument to be made that it does have a little bit more of a premium look, but realistically, the only difference you are going to notice in terms of touch is that this Pro upper does feel a little bit more grippy on the ball. It's a very subtle difference, and again, you kind of have to have one on each foot to even be able to tell a difference between the two at all, but it is a difference nonetheless. But in terms of feel, quality, pliability, comfort against your foot, even the overall shape of the football boot, there is no noticeable difference between these two, which I think is a very good thing and something that we don't often see with any takedown models. In other words, you are getting what feels like a top-end football boot upper for $140 or less. Difference number 3, and this is a small one, the heel liner. It's a soft microfiber material with a small amount of padding on the top-end Ultimate, where the Takedown Model Pro features more of like a smooth synthetic leather material with a very similar amount of padding, but ultimately it grips your socks really nicely, and again, you don't feel a difference. Difference number 4 are the insoles, where the top end Ultimate features this really nice nano grip, kind of like soft silicone lining material on the surface, which I really like. It prevents your foot from sliding around just a little bit, or at least takes some of that slippage away. And then the insole itself is a single layer of black foam with 2 perforated yellow foam inserts in the heel and forefoot, basically spanning the entire foot, where on the Pro, you're gonna find a much more traditional kind of smooth mesh type lining material, very, very soft, but obviously not as grippy as that nano grip liner, so you could view that as a downside. And then instead of black foam, you're going to find white foam that feels pretty well the same to me, if not even a little bit more dense, with the same yellow perforated insert. So other than the slightly less grippy liner, there really is no difference. With the final difference being the sole plate and stud pattern, where both of these boots are listed as FG/AG, but as you can see, on the top end Ultimate, you have more bladed studs, where on the Takedown Model Pro, you have some conical ones mixed in. And while I don't think either of these boots are true FG/AG stud patterns, they're definitely more targeted towards natural grass in terms of their characteristics and certainly the length of the studs. If you do want to use these on artificial grass, having more rounded studs, 3 in the forefoot and 2 at the base of the heel, will improve that ability to twist and pivot with your foot planted, which in turn will make these much safer to use on artificial grass. And what I also like about the Pro stud pattern in particular is that you actually get an extra stud on the lateral side of the foot, where if you do tend to play on slightly harder ground as well, having that extra stud will actually more evenly distribute the pressure underneath your foot, making for a much more comfortable experience long term. Definitely the Ultimate is slightly more aggressive, being that you have all bladed studs, but I don't think the trade-off for the rounded studs that they've thrown in is really a negative at all. It's almost like a variation of the same stud pattern that, depending on your needs and preferences, you might actually like more. It's also worth noting that the sole plates do feel a little bit different in terms of how they flex. It's the same base plate on the inside from what I can tell, but the stud plate that you see on the outside is a thicker plastic on the Pro, which again, in terms of long-term durability, might actually work out for you. It's the reason why there is extra weight to the Pro compared to the Ultimate. Nonetheless, if you prefer that slightly more kind of snappy sensation in the forefoot, it is actually a little bit stiffer than what you'll find from the Ultimate, but again, ultimately, no pun intended, still feels like something you'd find on a high-end football boot. On feet, like I've talked about throughout this entire video, there is very little to separate the Takedown Model Future Pro that I have on my feet compared to the top-end Future Ultimate. Despite the slight differences in the upper and lining materials, the feel is pretty well identical, meaning that you are getting a high-end football boot experience at $140, which is pretty unheard of. Usually, with any takedown model, there is some kind of a subtle difference in fit and feel compared to the top end. That is not the case here whatsoever. The only difference you might notice is the sole plate is a little bit firmer and arguably a little bit thicker, but again, you'd have to actually have an Ultimate on one foot and a Pro on the other to even be able to identify that difference whatsoever, because it is extremely subtle. From a fit perspective, they definitely have decent width to them all the way through, where I think these football boots are going to fit most people, even if you do have wider feet. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and similar to the top end Ultimate, they do have that little bit of extra length to them. I wouldn't even say it's quite a quarter size. So for me, sticking with my usual size 9.5 US works out perfectly, and for most people, I think that's probably the way to go. But if you are currently wearing your boots with a little bit of extra space, maybe going a half size down would be in your best interest. But like I said, for most people, true to size is what I would recommend. So in conclusion, unless you're one of those every gram counts people where you just want your boots to feel as light as possible, in which case I'm not sure that the Future Ultimate is even on your radar, there really isn't any reason in my eyes to pay the extra money for the Ultra Ultimate at $220 versus just getting the Pro at $140 or less with a coupon code. And what's even crazier is that depending on your needs and preferences, you might actually prefer the Pro over the Ultimate, where it's already unusual enough to suggest that the takedown model is as good as the top end one, but in this case, there's a suggestion to be made that the takedown model is even better than the top end version. And if we're talking about how the Future Pro compares to its competition, if we look at Nike, which probably has the most popular first tier takedown models, the Phantom GX Pro, they're good boots in a lot of ways, but I think these are significantly better. And even the Mercurial Pro series, whether it's the Vapor or the Superfly, I'm definitely picking these over those. They're certainly better than all of the 0.2 takedown models on offer from Adidas. And unless you want something with a leather upper, I don't think there's a better option out there for $140 or less. This is seriously as good as it gets and arguably as good as we've ever seen.